Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been anywhere near web development lately, especially the React world, you'll know it can feel, well, it moves fast.
Oh, definitely. Maybe a bit thrashy sometimes.
Exactly, thrashy. Frameworks pop up, paradigm shift. Just keeping track feels like a job sometimes.
It really can.
So today we want to cut through some of that noise. We're looking at a really interesting, different approach to modern web dev. One that seems really focused on developer experience, flexibility, and maybe a more composable way of building things.
That's a great way to put it.
We're diving into TanStack. It's this, well, suite of open source tools that have had a huge impact, maybe more quietly than some others.
The numbers are pretty staggering, yeah.
Billions of NPM downloads, hundreds of thousands of GitHub stars, millions of dependents. I mean, that's serious reach.
It really is. It's grown organically.
So our mission today is to really explore how TanStack, and especially this new framework they're building, TanStack Start, how it's offering a fresh take on that whole client-server balancing act, smoothing out common pain points and maybe giving developers more control back.
A lot to unpack there.
Let's dive in. So okay, TanStack, it's clearly more than just, a bunch of popular libraries bundled together. What's the bigger picture? It seems to cover a massive range, right? Apps to ideas.
It really does. It touches everything from like core web apps and routing, state management, data visualization, even complex things like data grids and tables.
Wow.
But the key thing, I think, for developers listening is not just that there are lots of tools, but how they're designed. They're meant to be these powerful, flexible building blocks, primitives that you can compose together.
Ah, okay, so less like one giant framework, more like Legos.
Kind of, yeah. Actually started maybe 8 years ago as an outlet for open source work. It grew out of solving very practical, data-heavy problems at a startup called Nozzle.
Right, real world needs driving it.
Exactly. And the creator only went full-time on TanStack maybe 6 months ago, which tells you something about its momentum.
Definitely. So what are some of those key building blocks, those packages people might know?
Well, there's TanStack Query, probably the most famous one, for async state management. There's TanStack Router, which focuses on type-safe routing. TanStack Table, that one's interesting. It's a headless UI for tables.
Headless UI, explain that a bit.
Sure. It means the library gives you all the hard stuff, the logic, the state management, the features like sorting, filtering, pagination. But it gives you 100% control over the actual rendering, the HTML, the CS, how it looks and feels.
Gotcha. So it doesn't dictate your styling?
Not at all. Same idea with TanStack Form for form state. There's TanStack Virtual for efficiently rendering long lists. TanStack Store for framework agnostic state. Ranger for slider. It's quite a collection.
And the common threads are?
Headless design where possible. Robust type safety. That's a huge one. And trying to be framework agnostic. And really, the core philosophy behind it all is it's not trying to be a monolithic giant like a Rails or a Laravel, but in JavaScript. It's about providing these really solid, flexible primitives and good abstractions.
So developers can build what they need on top?
Precisely. You compose your solution, you pick what you need. It's about flexibility, giving that control back.
That developer first thinking seems really baked in. And, speaking of helping developers, I keep hearing about the documentation. People rave about how clear it is, the code examples.
Yeah, the docs are a big focus.
What's the thinking there? Why do you think it works so well for people?
Well, it tries to cater to different ways people learn, Some people just want a quick start, get the basics, and then explore. So good, searchable docs are key.
Right.
Others love a deep dive, a detailed guide that walks them through from the ground up. So there are those two. And then you have the API reference crowd who just want the facts, the encyclopedia.
Covering all bases.
Trying to. And balancing text with useful code examples without getting too, quirky or distracting in the really critical parts. It needs to be clear.
Yeah. Clarity is king when you're stuck.
Totally. Interestingly, the creator mentioned trying AI, like GPT-3, early on for some router docs.
Oh, really? How'd that go?
Apparently not great. Struggled with the voice, hallucinated personality, just didn't quite capture that human touch needed for really effective docs. shows you still need that careful curation.
Yeah, absolutely. That user focus makes sense, especially if the whole philosophy is about empowering developers. Which kind of leads us perfectly into maybe the biggest thing they're working on now, TanStack Start.
Right, the full stack framework.
Yeah, it's in beta, running their own site, tanstack.com, for like 8 months already. Built on React and Solid. What makes this different from all the other full stack frameworks popping up? What's its angle, especially on the server side?
Good question. So under the hood, TanStack Start is powered by TanStack Router, naturally, and Vite for the front-end build. But the server side leverages some really interesting, powerful tools, particularly Nitro and H3.
Nitro and H3, tell me more.
Okay. So Nitro is described as a next-generation server toolkit. Think of it as handling all the server stuff, bundling your code, normalizing requests and responses across different environments. Its superpower is this deploy anywhere capability. You can literally change one line in your config, a single string, and deploy the same code to Cloudflare workers, Vercel, Netlify, Node.js. It's incredibly portable.
Wow, that is powerful. No lock-in.
Exactly. And the output is tiny, usually under a megabyte. Then there's H3, which is the underlying HTTP server framework Nitro often uses. It's built on web standards, super fast. Runtime agnostic works on Dino, Bun, Node, Workers, TinyCore. Very composable, designed for speed.
So a really modern portable server foundation?
Definitely. It avoids locking you into one specific platform or runtime.
Okay, so with that server power, let's zoom in on TanStack Router itself. The big claim is 100%. Type safety with built-in data fetching, that sounds ambitious. How does it actually work?
It is ambitious, but it delivers. What's really fascinating is how it positions itself compared to, say, Next.js's app router, which is very server first.
Right.
TanStack Router is fundamentally client-side first, but it's fully server capable. You don't have to think server first if you don't want to. You opt into server features from that client perspective.
Interesting distinction.
And the type safety is, well, it's deeply integrated. It uses inference, so it understands your route paths, your URL parameters, search params, even how routes nest. It knows the types of data associated with each route.
So it catches errors at build time, not runtime?
Exactly. It prevents those common cannot read property X of undefined errors related to routing, search params, loading spates. It's a huge boost for developer experience. Plus, it has its own built-in caching layer, like a mini TanStack query inside.
Oh.
Yeah. So, it can handle data fetching patterns like stale while revalidate, SWR automatically, even if you're not using the main TanStack query library. It manages that async data link to routes.
Okay. This next part is where I think things get really interesting, especially given the current, let's call it discourse, around React's server components.
Yeah. Yes, RSCs and used server, the hot topic.
Right. There's been a lot of debate, maybe some thrashiness, as you said earlier, developers trying to migrate big existing apps to frameworks like NextApp Router, which really push server first, have hit some roadblocks, frustrations.
For sure, it's a big shift.
How does TanStack approach this? What's their take on RSCs?
Well, the creator's view seems quite nuanced. He said they are very cool for specific use cases. Things like maybe offloading a heavy markdown parser to the server or reducing a massive client bundle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, specific tools for specific jobs.
Exactly. But he cautions against what he sees as maybe an overprescription or overselling of RSCs as the only future, especially Next.js's current implementation.
Why the caution?
Because forcing large existing client-heavy applications, which, let's face it, are most successful apps out there today, into a completely server-first model can be, well, a really tough migration. Huge re-architecture costs potentially. It's not always practical.
That makes sense. So if TanStack Start isn't pushing use server in the same way, what's the alternative? How do you get server capabilities into your components?
They offer a different primitive create server function.
Create server function. Okay.
Think of it less like a directive slapped onto a function and more like a higher order function you wrap your server logic in. It gives you much more explicit control.
Control over what?
Over the HTTP method, for one. You explicitly say, this is a GET, this is a POST, PUT, DELETE. If it's a GET, you can opt into client-side caching. And crucially, it integrates with schema validation libraries like Zod or YEP.
Validation built in?
Yeah, on both the client and the server. So your function signature on the client matches the server, type safe, and the data gets validated automatically when it hits the server. Catches bad data early.
That sounds cleaner maybe, or explicit.
It aims to be. But here's the really mind-bending part, connecting it back to RSCs.
Okay.
If your create server function returns React elements, JSX,
Oh, yeah.
it implicitly becomes a React server component stream under the hood.
Whoa. Okay, hang on.
Yeah. It reframes RSCs not as this totally separate magical thing, but simply as any other async data source. It's just a readable stream that happens to contain partially rendered JSX.
So if it's just async data,
Then TanStack Query can handle it. All those battle-tested features Query has for managing async state caching, background updates, SWR, granular invalidation based on keys, you can apply them directly to your RSCs served via create server function.
so you could invalidate a specific server component based on a mutation?
Exactly. You can have leaf node composable RSCs, small components fetched from the server, and when data changes, you can use queries invalidation mechanisms to refetch just that specific component, not the whole page, not the whole app layout.
That sounds incredibly powerful, especially for complex UIs, avoiding those full-page reloads or massive data refetches.
It brings queries fine-grained control to the world of server-rendered components. It treats them like first-class async citizens.
That's a really different mental model.
Yeah.
Okay, so beyond routing and this clever take on server functions, what about other DX developer experience things? Middleware comes to mind that can get messy, especially keeping things type safe.
Right. TanStack Start tackles that too with a type-safe middleware system for those server functions.
How does that work?
It's designed to avoid what they call forgettability. Think about authentication. You always need to check if a user's logged in for certain actions.
Yeah, easy to forget sometimes.
So, you can define middleware, say an AUSeth middleware, that checks the session. If the user is logged in, it adds a typed user object to the context. Now, every subsequent middleware and the final server function itself knows that user object is there, typed safely. If you try to access context user in a function where that middleware hasn't run, you get a type error.
Ah, preventing runtime errors again.
Exactly. It uses before and after phases, a bit like SvelteKit hooks, to manage the flow and keep type inference working through the whole chain. And it relies on things like async local storage behind the scenes to pass that context around without you having to manually thread it everywhere.
Nice. Less boilerplate, more safety.
That's the goal.
And you mentioned headless UIE.